Good evening, BookTube. This is Johnny. Time to make another video. Tonight is a Monday night here in West Michigan. It is 7:53 at night. It is October the 16th. We're in the middle, well now, like I always do, when I get through the end of the middle of the month, on the 15th, I go to the second half of my monthly diary. So today I wrote on October the 16th in my second volume, and I ended on page 938. 938. I should hit 1,000. So tomorrow is October the 17th, 2017, and I will be on page 939. I got a call tonight from the lady who oversees volunteers at the local library used bookstore, the Book Nook, and she asked me if I would cover for somebody tomorrow. So I wrote here, Book Nook from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So I got to remind myself that I do it tomorrow morning from 10 until 1 in the afternoon, the used bookstore. Which I don't mind since, like I said, my wife has been gone since the 10th. She's been gone 6 days. 6 days, and she doesn't come back until next Tuesday. So how many days I got left before she comes home? Today is the 16th, tomorrow's the 17th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more days. She comes back on the 24th from Seattle, Washington. Well, our son, Josiah, and his wife live on Mercer Island there in the Seattle area. And I got a phone call today. They took her to the baby doctor. They call him pediatrician. Marika's doing well. She's doing fine. Yeah, Josiah has been doing background. When he was in college at Calvin College, a long time ago, 10 years ago, it must be by now, he got on ancestral.com and he was doing research on our family, my side of the family, our side of the Keene family, not my wife's. But so he sent me some documents today that he had not looked at his ancestral.com account in a while, and they had updated, so it was kind of interesting. So yeah, today is, like I said, is a Monday. What did I do today? Well, today, like I said, I've been kind of spaced out since my wife's been gone. I'm kind of at a loss, and I don't think I read anything this morning. Let me see. This morning, yesterday was a Sunday, and I went downtown to Rita's World, our local independent bookstore. It's not a retail, it's owned by a family here in Holland who've owned it for 50 years. And I went down there to get some Sunday newspapers. Now, I don't read Sunday newspapers, but I got them for my wife when she gets back from Washington. My wife's likes newspapers, and I just kept up the we just do that on Sunday. She goes down and gets newspapers, so I went down and got newspapers. But I also got 2 books. I couldn't resist. I looked around, and I bought a book that I had looked at on Amazon, and I had been thinking about buying it, and I bought it. And it's called Fantasyland, How America Went Haywire, A 500-Year History by Kurt Andersen. And it says here in the flap here, in this sweeping, elegant history of America, one of our sharpest observers, Kurt Andersen, demonstrates that what's happening in our country today, this strange post-truth fake news moment we're all living through, is not something entirely new, but rather the ultimate expression of our national character and path. America was founded by wishful dreamers, magical thinkers, true believers, by impressioneros and their audiences, by huskers and their suckers. Believe whatever you want, fantasy is deeply embedded in our DNA. Over the course of 5 centuries, from Salem witch trials to Scientology to the satanic panic of the 1980s, from the P.T. Barnum to Hollywood and anything goes wild and crazy 60s, from conspiracy theories to our fetish for guns and obsession with extraterrestrials, our particular love of the fantastic has made America exceptional in a way that we never fully acknowledge. With the gleeful irradiation, and tell it like it is, ferocity of Christopher Hitchens, Andersen explores whether the great American experiment in liberty has gone off the rails. And yeah, it was recommended by Walter Isaacson and Sarah Vowell and some other people. I have 2 novels by Kurt Andersen. I have not read these, but he wrote this novel, Turn of the Century, by Kurt Andersen. It's over, like 600 pages. And he wrote this big book, Heyday. They're like historical. Well, I don't think this is historical fiction. This is more like magical kind of fantasy historical thing. So I bought that, and I've been reading. That's why I read today, and that's why I read last night before I went to bed. Reading this, writing in my diary today, and then I picked up a second book that was 50% off. This is The Art of McSweeneys. Now, I have shown you that the last thing I got from the Book Nook a couple of weeks ago was this thing by McSweeneys. It's the quarterly. And this one's McSweeneys Quarterly, issue number 13. And it's on comics. All about comics. And this one is Art of McSweeneys. And what it is, they go through the artwork of their books and their literary magazine, which I've shown you. I don't have the whole set. I just have a couple. Believer, it's like a literary kind of magazine. It's kind of a hodgepodge of all kinds of things, but I'm sure those who are into literary journals know about Believer and know about McSweeney's books. So it goes to the artwork, like it goes from, it goes into the history of how McSweeney started their publishing and their magazine, Believer. And see, it has this kind of, this cover on it. See this cover? They do all kinds, they do all kinds of interesting book kind of covers. And then they have this big, huge thing here. These are all the people, the editors of McSweeney who are involved, have been involved in their literary enterprise. So, it's kind of, I kind of like, it was 50% off, and I couldn't resist it. So, when I first bought it, I didn't really know exactly what it was. I thought it was about art, like, an art thing. But I'm really glad I bought it because I like reading about the history of literary journals. The Paris Review, the New York Times Review. I like reading about history of like the New York Times, books about the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the New Yorker. So it goes into each of the issues of the Believer and like the quarterlies. Now, I'll give you an example. They also publish books. And way back in 2003, they published something that nobody else would publish. And it's this. It's Vollmann's Rising Up and Rising Down. They published this massive work, over 3,000 pages. And they put it, I bought this way back when it first came out. I think it cost me $100 when I bought it. Now I saw it today on Amazon, they go for up to $500. And see how they do the nice binding? It's all, nobody would publish this. In Vollmann, the condition was that it could not be abridged. I mean, Vollmann had certain criteria about how it was to be published, and the only people who would do it would be McSweeney. You see it on there, and of course it's owned by David Eggers, who's, you know, is a very famous novelist, essayist. And yeah, it was copyrighted in 2003. See, it has all these, if you open it up, it has all this kind of photography in it, lots of photography. Well, this one, one thing about Vollmann, William T. Vollmann, he does a lot of photography, and so when you look at his books, there's always photography, and he's done separate books on photography. So they published this massive thing that nobody would publish except McSweeneys. They also, so there's an article in here about the publishing of Vollmann's Rising Up and Rising Down, which is like the history, and it's a 4,000-page manuscript on the motivations and ethical complexities of violence. That's what it's a 400,000-page manuscript. That's what it was, of the motivations and ethical implications, ethical complexities of violence. So it's really, as you know, I have all of Vollmann's works. I buy everything I can of his new. I mean, when I first got into Vollmann, I did buy his earlier works used, but the last several years, I've been buying all his books new. And he has a new one coming out next year, a 2-volume work, I think, on global warming, the effects of global warming on the environment, something like that. They also published something I just bought a couple of months ago. They published this book. You remember a while back I got really into Stephen Dixon, and I was buying all of his books, and they published one of Stephen Dixon's novels, and this was published by McSweeney. You can tell it's a unique book cover. You know, they have that. They have the little eye in it, and they have a chapter on that, on the making of that book and how they did it. So it has all kinds of, it just has all kinds of artwork in there of all the, see, here's a picture of all the Believer magazines. See them? I went online, you could buy, somebody was selling the whole complete set of Believer's magazine for $3,000, the whole set. Now, I started buying them when they first came out. I have the first issue. The reason why I never really I didn't keep on buying them, for one thing, they were too expensive. And one thing else, they were hard to get, and most stores wouldn't carry them. I mean, bookstores, they're very hard to get, and so I just never got into collecting them. If I see a McSweeney used book, I always get it. That's why I got this thing here, and why I bought Vollmann, because before I bought Rising Up and Rising Down, I had read a couple books by him, and I had read that this was coming out, and I pre-ordered it and got it from McSweeney, and I got it for $100. And that was way back in 2003. So I showed you they put out McSweeney's Mammoth Treasury of Thrilling Tales edited by Michael Chabon. I showed you that, and I did finish reading Husband the Distinction by Paul Lafarge, and I have been reading tonight his new book, The Night Ocean, which is historical fiction on the life of H.P. Lovecraft by Paul Lafarge. So I never really have read this whole massive thing by Vollmann. I keep it in my main study near me because it's one of my treasures. It's beautiful kind of book, and but it weighs a ton. So I was reading that article in here. I was reading the article in here about this, and what they talked about when they had to publish it. They had to do all the fact checking on it. So they had all these people had to go through that 4,000 page manuscript, because it's basically history. It's from all these books and magazines and journals, and they had to fact check everything that Vollmann had written. And it took them, I think, almost 2 years. They had to use the UC Berkeley campus library, the Oakland Library in Oakland, California. It was a mammoth job, and they just did it day and night, day after day, week after week. It was a massive undertaking. And then they did an index. There's an index here. Annotated contents, and the index, annex, sources cited. So it's really it's a nonfiction. It's not a novel. It's a nonfiction. So like I said, I thought I'd show you that. Yeah, they do. And I found out you can get most of these quarterlies from Amazon really cheap if you wanted to start collecting them. But I'm not really into them. I mean, all kinds of reasons. I mean, there's too much to buy, there's too much to read, there's little time. I used to subscribe to magazines, and I found out I never read them. Our oldest son brings me over the old New Yorkers, and I look through them, and there's magazines that come in at the Book Nook, used magazines, and I look at them, but there's just too much to read, and I don't have time to read a literary magazines that's devoted mainly to writers that are not on the mainstream, experimental writing. It's not, they do have mainstream writers that contribute to their magazine, but most of the people are not ones you would commonly find on the New York bestseller list. So that's what's going on here. Like I said, it's a Monday night. I'm sitting here and I'm going to read this until I go to bed. The Night Ocean, a novel by Paul Lafarge. And tomorrow's a Tuesday. I'll volunteer at the Book Nook, and life just keeps going by. So thank you for the comments. Thank you for the new subscribers, and hope you're having a good week. And if you got any questions, anything you want to share with me, what you're reading, what you're thinking, what you got any prayer requests, just feel free to tell me, and So I'll sign off until the next time. Bye.